Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you.
No, wait, my audio's hot. Your audio's still cold. That's awkward.
Police initially said Floyd was resisting arrest.
Welcome back, Wolf. Wolf here.
It's clearly been a while. Game streams are much easier to produce.
Yes. Behind Enemy Lines on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. And of course, with me is my co-host and producer, barely producing.
Wow, I think I just got demoted live on air, guys. Wow. I'm doing just fine. Just fine. Like we said yesterday, it's kind of nice to take a little bit of a break, but we are back, and yes. sort of out of quarantine, sort of.
Yeah, and I actually on Monday go back to normal operations, as far as not being quarantined anymore. Yeah. So today's topic is George Floyd and his murder, if you want to call it. It was definitely at least negligent homicide. I'm not sure how the courts are going to deem it, but it sure as hell seemed like murder to me. So basically, the long and short of it is, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, there is a video of George Floyd being arrested for what's not counterfeiting, but
no. So he was using a forged.
Forged.
Yeah, reportedly he was using a forged $10 or $20 bill to pay for Chinese food. Reportedly.
Okay. So it's basically the same thing. Counterfeiting does fit in this case. But anyways, so being arrested for a non-violent crime, and they say he resisted, but we have video showing to what degree he resisted, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the police officer arresting him, after having handcuffed him and pinned him to the ground, decided it was necessary to place his knee with a large amount of his body weight on the back of his neck for over 7 minutes, which resulted him suffocating. Not suffocating from breathing, but basically getting a blood choke, most likely, but dying from being choked out by the knee on the back of his neck. Meanwhile, he was telling the police officer that he couldn't breathe. He wasn't fighting back. He wasn't wiggling around. He wasn't fighting the officer. He was saying that he couldn't breathe and was asking for him to stop doing that. And as was a crowd of people saying, "Hey, you're killing this guy. Take your knee off the back of his neck." And he didn't, and the guy died. Now, I have not seen anywhere where they teach police officers to do this. Now, I know you put a knee on the back of someone's back to hold them down, to put weight on them, but putting your knee on the back of someone's neck, just the neck, by itself risks causing long-term injury. Because you can definitely damage the neck very easily.
Yeah, some of the police YouTubers that typically do cop breakdown videos, they were also in pretty much unanimous consent that that this was not appropriate. And one of them discussed the tactic of using a knee to hold someone down, and that's only used in like very extreme cases. If there was a threat, if they were still an active threat, which from the video, it would appear that he was not an active threat at the time. So that would, in the training, it is discussed, but it was not used at an appropriate time.
So in the training for both military and police, and we have military police, right? The amount of force you use it scales up with the amount of force that the person is using against you. You don't if they're like using verbal judo, you don't use actual judo. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So if they are like just trying to pull their hand away from your handcuff, you trying to handcuff them. You don't pull your gun at them and shoot them. There's a scaled, amount of force you use to detain someone, and that even when you are using the knee technique to pull someone down, it wouldn't be on the back of the neck, and it would be for someone who is actually fighting you, right? Not someone who is just laying there. Now, there's a second. Initially, the police officers that were involved in killing this guy, George Floyd, they said that he was resisting arrest. There was a second camera angle that came out later on. You guys can also see that we're not showing these videos on YouTube because we know what's going to happen if we do. Video will be taken down. But
even talking about it probably get
I know
whatever.
we're definitely playing fire here, but it's important to talk about. Thankfully, these videos are easy to find. So if you guys want to know what we're talking about, please look at the videos. They're not very long. I mean, it is kind of disturbing. So the second angle showed from the other side of the car, because you'll mostly just see George Floyd's shoulders and head next to a tire of a car in the first video. In the other angle, you see that the amount of resisting he did was they went to arrest him and he flopped on the ground and was basically like, you're going to have to move me. He wasn't violently resisting. He was passively resisting. That does not require a violent response. They already had him handcuffed.
Yeah. And then just the sheer amount of weight on the neck there. So that officer looked pretty sturdy. I would be shocked if he was clocking in under 220. And he was putting most of that weight as a point source from his knee onto this guy's neck.
Yes.
Which is a lot of weight on your neck.
It looked like to me this guy was not going for a practical effect. He was trying to cause pain.
Yes. Having watched it, I would agree with that. It was it was meant to be a punishment for having resisted, which
right.
It is not the police. I know the police they do this sometimes, but it is not their job to punish or to be revengeful for how somebody resisted arrest. Their job is merely to arrest. Should punishment be required? Well, we have a whole legal system for that.
Exactly. So I think that his intent, he seemed angry, and he was not doing his job. He's not doing his duty at the time. He was not trying to arrest the guy. He was trying to cause as much pain as possible, and his choosing to do that resulted in the man's life. I don't know, and I kind of doubt he intended to kill the guy. But that doesn't really matter. The actions he was taking were definitely not in the line of duty. They were because he was angry and spiteful, and he wanted to cause pain.
But
and
I think similarly to the Ahmaud Arbery case, where you've got very, very different circumstances, where you've got civilians inserting themselves into a situation versus a cop inserting himself into a situation, which we actually discussed that it's the cop's job to do that. But it's you've taken on both instances. You take on the same responsibility. You must accept responsibility for the safety of the person that you're pulling in to the extent necessary. Obviously, self-defense still comes into effect there. But when you're actively going into those situations, we can't just be having casualties right and left. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for you, even when you're in a foreign country. It's certainly not acceptable for our civilian law enforcement to be having casualties like this. Just oops. It's just kind of scattershot. My mistake there. No, they have to be taking this like very high burden of responsibility. And so while I would agree with you that I don't think that he intended to kill. Same thing with the Ahmaud Arbery case. I don't think with the what was it, the McMichaels? I don't think that they intended to kill either, but they didn't do their due diligence in ensuring the safety of the person they were taking in. Which, when you're inserting yourself into that position to take someone into custody like that, like I said, I think it's a much higher burden, and it's not enough that you don't intend to kill. It has to be that you're actively trying to ensure the safety of the person that you're taking in, or you back off and wait for backup. That's a very common police technique. If you can't do it yourself safely, then call for backup. It's not, well, I don't feel like calling for backup, so I guess this guy just has to die. That's not how the police work, or that's not how it's supposed to work.
Sorry about that.
Are you back? Did you?
I'm back. Sure. Yeah, for a second. So, what was last? What did you leave off on?
Wow. Okay. What? You can watch it on the replay, I guess.
No. What is the last thing we talked about here? Other than they have a responsibility for the person that they've arrested.
Well, just that. Like I said, it's Well, I just said it, but my fault. You weren't listening. Just go on with what you were gonna say.
Okay. Oh, fair enough. This obviously pissed a lot of people off. But what should be noted is there was immediate people on the right saying all lives matter, and there was people on the left saying Black Lives Matter, BLM messaging, and all that. But there was no one defending the
There was also a third side. They were stealing TVs.
We're getting into that. Okay. But the point is, no one's defending the police officer. He's clearly wrong. And
he's actually a former police officer now too.
Yes, he was fired. But and I think the other people that were standing by,
all 4 of his cohort there were fired as well.
Yeah. So and good on that. I'm glad they did fire them, because that they're not good police officers or good people. But the thing is, a lot of the narrative on the left is that the people on the right don't care about black people being killed by police officers, and that they're just okay with it. But immediately, conservatives who actually care about not having police brutality, they responded to this not because it was a black guy, but because it was someone who was being abused by the police. And that's why they responded to it. That's why they were outright raged. That's why I'm angry that this happened. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with whether or not the police are actually protecting our rights or subverting them. If they're harming citizens or helping them, that's what matters to us.
I've heard some other conservatives talking this week too about, and I tend to agree with the sentiment that there's the view of cops and the view of like the thin blue line and stuff like that on the right has typically been very much in support of default support for them in blue. That has been challenged substantially this year. Due to certain goings on with a certain pandemic and the way enforcement and following orders has been carried out without any kind of thought for duty to constitutional responsibilities, and it's been pretty pervasive. In this particular incident, I tend to agree with this idea that it's hard to maintain the not all cops narrative when you had 4 of them there who all stood by watching this to happen, and none of them did anything about it, while one of them was the one doing it. And so we've I think it's getting challenging there, and like you said, we don't like this because this isn't what the cops were supposed to be. This isn't what we wanted, and we're seeing a lot of incidents more recently where they are acting way above and beyond the mandate that they have, that the public gives them. The public gives police officers a mandate to protect the public. and they are going way above and beyond that. Not in a good way. They're abusing the power that we give them with that mandate.
Yeah.
And it's it's getting kind of hard. Part of me being like fully objective is, if I really step way out of my ideological bias, is I wonder if maybe this it is going to end up being like, well, this is kind of what the BLM and Antifa has been seeing the whole time. And maybe it was just a matter of where the effects were and that kind of stuff. I need to think about it more, but it's I don't necessarily think that it's well, we told you so.
No.
But it looks suspiciously like that, and that's what they're going to call it. And I don't actually have a good argument for why it isn't we told you so, to be honest.
Well, for one thing, I am live right now, and second, so second,
we got a special guest tonight. It's a doggy.
Second, we have we've had police officers during the coronavirus thing actually say, no, we're not going to enforce those laws. We've had police officers and sheriffs do the right thing. So I don't think that the fact that some police officers in some states and some cities that are very Democrat run counters the not all police officers, but it definitely shows there are some police officers in some areas that are not serving the people, and I think that is a local problem that needs to be. They need to be changing who they are, putting in those jobs. If the police force is not serving people, then they be swapped. They be changed.
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, though. Is it's some areas, some cities, and I think it's mainly cities.
Yes.
Especially during the coronavirus pandemic, I think I don't think that either of us were really into big cities to begin with, but certainly this year, all of the worst horrors of what a big city could be are coming to light. As hard as the big cities were getting hit by lockdowns and coronavirus, a lot of the rural areas, the more rural the better, obviously, for the outcome. They weren't seeing hardly any effects from that. They had a lot of their cops jurisdictions were saying we're not enforcing this. That wasn't coming from the big cities. That was coming from townships and counties. We saw that with the Virginia gun laws earlier in the year, where the big cities were into it, and the small counties and small towns sheriffs said, no, we're not doing that. And so, again, we don't see. This is similar. They're all unique in their own way, but this is similar to other instances of, I guess, what the left would term a racial incident for a black man being killed in some way by a police officer. But we don't see those in small towns. Like you don't like those stories don't come out of Podunk, Michigan. Those stories come out of exclusively your big major cities that are like, no matter what state you're in, these big cities that are recognizable to everybody in America. Like, they're very big cities. And we really don't see these things coming out of smaller areas. It's really out of the bigger areas. And so I think it just kind of reiterates that cities are the problem. Cities tend to be run by more liberal leaders there. And there's some correlation. I would certainly have no interest in moving to a city ever again in my whole life here. I mean, there's just looking more and more like chaos. I think we're going to talk about the riots going on in Minneapolis here.
We're going to get
shortly.
there, yeah.
But it's just that sort of stuff doesn't happen in your smaller farming communities or your little side towns. There's something. I don't think it's I'm not on the Boogaloo train, but there's something about the cities that is decaying at a ever accelerating rate, and I think this year it's coming to a head. But there's really all across America, cities are in broad collapse. A lot of bad stuff going on.
Another difference between the left and the right and how they view situations like this is when the the people on the far left, they look at this situation, they immediately assume the motive of the police officer as being racist, and that this is part of a racist trend where white cops are killing black men because they are black men and for no other reason. There can't be that he's a flawed person who's a bad guy who just is, and that guy, those officers are bad. Doesn't mean they're racist, and also doesn't mean that it's a trend that the police force is run by racism and the killing of black men. Whereas the people on the right, they say this is an example of police brutality. It doesn't matter the skin color. There's nothing in the video that implies race. Is what are the actions being taken? And this is an example of police brutality. The color of the skin of the two individuals doesn't matter to the problem that needs to be solved. That's demonstrated in this video.
Well, and I'll do you one better. The Democrats really showed their hand during the coronavirus, where obviously towards the beginning there, the projections were saying that a lot of people were going to die. A lot of people did end up dying. I don't think that the fact that it was only 100,000 instead of 200,000, it's like, well, those models were just so wrong. I still think it was pretty bad. But towards the beginning, when we thought that it was going to be in the millions of people dying, we had multiple Democrats. Like I think it would probably be more than I can count on two hands. Democrats on the record as recently as 3 months ago saying we can't let this crisis go to waste. We even had Hillary, who was saying the old adage. She thought it was a virtue to not let a crisis go to waste because that's the kind of person she is. So if the Democrats are willing to do that with 2 million people, or what they think will be 2 million dead people, and saying, well, this is the perfect political opportunity to get my legislation passed, what they wouldn't even lift a finger to say for this one dead guy. Why would they not exploit that? And that's kind of the difference here. Is the right, as you're saying, the right's kind of looking at this as like, that's kind of a authoritarian, that's police brutality. That's kind of a symptom of big government. This is not what we want to have. Jackboots walking around our streets, oppressing us, killing us, and the left, instead of us looking at it as a problem to solve, the left is like, well, we got a dead man here. That's an opportunity. I can get some legislation passed. Kind of hope that another one dies so that I can get more legislation passed. I think that's where the big difference there comes from. Is, again, if the Democrats are willing to, on national TV, multiple ones say, well, 2 million dead people sounds like a great opportunity to get some legislation passed, why would they not think the same thing about one guy?
Absolutely. So that narrative around situations like this only creates a divide. Rather than it being the entire community, both black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, all saying, hey, we're all opposed to these actions. Let's, fix the police force and fix our government that are doing this to all of us because you are a member of our community. They are now dividing that and making it a white versus black or minority versus white issue and not focusing on the actual problem. And on a side note, I'm sure there are some minority of people on the right that are trying to justify what this police officer did in his defense, because there is like you said, there is an inherent move on the right to try to be pro-cop because we aren't anti-cop, and to defend them because so many times in the past they've said things about an arrest or about a shooting that said the cop killed the person, and then it came out later when we got more information that wasn't what happened. That we've kind of been conditioned to be skeptical of claims like this, right? So some people might be trying to defend this video and the cops, but they shouldn't, because it really is going to hurt. What they did has hurt cops everywhere. There's going to be cops that are already getting shot at because the community now believes that the police are out to get them because of people like these cops. And they have a legitimate reason to think at least that they're not being served by these officers. They're wrong to think that just because these officers are bad, that all officers are bad. But they have a reason to fear them if you have cops like this in your community.
Well, and it's...
All you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Says, $2. He says, Boogaloo. Also, seriously, came late, and it's a bit haphazard for me, so what's up, meatbags?
Oh, we're talking about the George Floyd killing.
Yes.
And how the police officers are murderers. Just those ones, not all officers, and not all officers at that precinct either. Just those individual officers. One killed, the rest were.
Well, it certainly needs to be a pretty. I hope that part of this FBI investigation, which I'm sure that'll only take 30 years to complete, because unless it's Russia gay, they don't do anything quick.
That still took 3 years.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I think that, to the extent of what you were just saying, well, it's probably not everyone at the precinct. Well, it was 4 people in a squad. That's statistically unlikely that they were the only 4 in the precinct that would be okay with this or would think that this was something to do, that was an acceptable way of dealing with something.
I don't know Joe Schmo back at the precinct. I don't know him. You don't know him. No one in our audience knows any one of the police officers at that precinct. So it would be a bad.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I hope that the FBI. I hope that the FBI investigation looks into what is the training. This allegedly this officer. Well, the former officer that was involved, that was the killer in this instance. Apparently, he's got a pretty spotty record with other similar instances of violence. I'd be curious: is he an outlier at the precinct, or is that precinct have a lot of people with spotty records for public safety?
That's probably what I mean. A lot more.
Yeah,
but
and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I think it's all of them. I'm just saying statistically it's unlikely, and I hope that the FBI investigation reveals some of that.
Yeah, it's just really important that everyone who's rioting and everyone in the community don't just say, well, these officers were bad, so that's everyone who wears that uniform is also bad.
Well,
because some people are actually thinking that, Well,
no. So I don't think that there's any causation there. I don't think that they saw this and they're like, well, I think the police are out to get me. I think that they already had a preconceived notion of the police, and this was an excuse to go get a free TV. I don't think that I think giving the rioters now there's a difference.
There's 2 different groups here.
There's 2 groups here. There's the protesters and the rioters. Protesters we'll talk about in a second here, but the rioters, I think that implying that there's any correlation between the event and their feelings about the event is a real great disservice to everyone. I just think it's completely dishonest. Not that I mean you're being dishonest, but like when the media and the left is trying to do that, they're trying to equate like, oh well, they're stealing TVs and burning down Section 8 housing because they're sad about Floyd's death.
That's unrelated.
I think that trying to draw any correlation between their actions rioting and what's going on here is not an effective strategy.
No. Now there's 2 groups.
Yeah. Now for the protesters, I would agree, but I also think that largely they probably have preconceived notions about the cops. Certainly, this instance doesn't do anything to dissuade them of those notions.
Makes it worse, I would say, because it was so flagrant. It backs up any of the. So some people in those communities are taught that police are bad since they're kids. A lot actually having had a direct experience of a police officer being bad, but then when they see these incidences, they're experiencing it as if it happened to them. Right? They're now filled with the same fear that this could happen to them. These instances, and as they happen over and over again, build fear in the community each time. There's a spike, and if that never happened again, it would slowly go away. That fear, but they keep this. Every incident adds that fear and reopens those wounds. Well, but like you said, there's 2 different groups there. There's the groups of people who actually live in that community who are protesting because they don't feel safe because the cops, in this instance, are not taking care of them. But then we have people who are just opportunists that come from other communities that say, oh, there was a cop killing that's really got people upset. Let's go there and take an opportunity to steal stuff. And they don't even care about the issue at hand. They're not there for the issue being protested. They're there to cause mayhem and steal things. And they're directly harming the people in that community who are actually protesting because of a legitimate problem that affects their community.
Well, and one of the reasons, too, why they kind of have that preconceived notion is the way the media works. So to giving them the benefit of the doubt, it's certainly a more interesting story when something like this happens versus when a cop just does a good job, right? Because that happens every day, hundreds, thousands of times all across the country. It's not newsworthy when the cop does his job, right? It is newsworthy when something like this happens.
All you can talk about
and
is
Timberwolf
money
has given us
and
$5.
fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Timberwolf says $5. Jefferson calls cities pestilence to the morals, the health, and the liberties of man. He's a man ahead of his time there. I think, New York was around then. He's probably talking about that. So, where was that? Yeah, so the newsworthiness of it. So you have not just kind of cultural issues, being anti-cop and kind of growing up with that, but you also have that's the only media stories that you have is, you only see these bad stories about the cops. And certainly in recent years, the media has not just used those as like, well, those are newsworthy stories, so we'll report on them. They've also used them as foils to say, not only are these newsworthy, these are evidence of systemic racism. And they've tried their best to play it up. And we've only seen this grow worse and worse since Ferguson, certainly. That contributes a lot to it. So they're all ready to go when something like this happens. They're just waiting for the next one to happen. And the media, they know their role. The rioters and protesters know, the rioters know that they'll get cover from the left and they can go get their TV. And the protesters are, they're just kind of following an ideology. They would have come out and protest for, a hoax crime, or they'll come out for this one. I don't think it's necessarily that principled of a stance if you would have equally come out for a hoax, but it is what it is. I think this time the right or the non-leftists, we'll go with that. I got them joining in the chorus this time to say that this was wrong. I think that lends a lot of credence to the fact that it really was wrong. But it's instead of looking to us and saying, thank you, like, help us, like, let's join up and, like, let's fix this situation. It's like, well, everyone on the right's racist.
The thing about the right is they don't take up a cause usually. The right's a very large group. Let's say people that are more of our side of politics.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, like anti-leftist.
Yeah, anti-leftist. So they don't take up the cause because of the political message they're trying to get here. People weren't saying all lives matter and criticizing these cops and saying they should be fired because it would politically benefit them. In fact, you could make the argument that this politically is a disadvantage to them. The message it goes against their message of pro-cop, right? But it shows that they are taking political opinions or political positions on principle, not what will support their political philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. And then we've gone over that a lot of times. We talked about this during the Ahmaud Arbery case. Is there's for the left, there's classes of there's categories of events that happen, and their response is like clockwork predictable. Whether it was a real event or it was a hoax or real, their response to it will be exactly the same, and the facts absolutely do not matter whatsoever. Something will happen, it'll get classified as this kind of incident, and then clockwork, they come out to protest or do whatever they, respond to it however they would. For us, we'll see situations that seem to be in a similar class, or the left has classified them in the same way, but we will respond to them differently each time because we're looking at them from a principled position, and the facts do matter with a principled position. So, for instance, this would be one where, if you were on the left, you would just assume that we would be in support of the cop, because typically we are. But looking at the facts of the case and looking at our principles, we're not mindless zealots here, and that's why our response is different. But you see, like with, jumping back to like the Jussie Smollett case, but there's 100 others that are just like that, where it was shown to be provably false, like egregiously fake story. And you still had people that were like, I don't care if it's fake. It's morally right, and I'm going to protest. I'm going to get upset about it. I'm going to rant and rave about it just the exact same way that they do for this real situation. And so I don't think it's I don't see any principle in that. If you would have done it for a fake case, it's not principled to have done it for just that you happen to be right this time.
I completely agree. The left doesn't tend to make a political stance based on principle. It's based off trying to win a political advantage. So they'll advocate for something they know to be false as long as it fits their narrative. It's to be morally right, like you said, not factually true. Yeah. So more into the story, right? So the governor of Minnesota has come out and condemned the actions of the police officers, said that there was an FBI investigation ongoing, and he also called for the National Guard to come in and provide support because of the rioting. And the rioting's gotten pretty bad. A lot of looting, places getting torched, a lot of violence against members of the community. And the police have also been, doing not flashbangs,
tear gas.
Tear gas.
No, I think they have been doing flashbangs in there.
Have they?
Yeah, I was watching Tucker last night, and there was a reporter on the ground that he was, he had a live feed to him, and there was tear gas canisters, and then there was loud bangs that I don't think were, because the tear gas canisters are more of a pop.
Okay, so they may have been flashbangs.
But I believe he referenced that they were also doing flashbangs, and there was very loud bangs in the background that did not sound. I could be way off base on this. It was I don't have much experience with it, but I would think that the tear gas canisters are more of a poof sound rather than a hard bang.
Yeah, they don't go bang. I'm not gonna say I know for sure, but basically the police have been engaging with the rioters, and I've heard some people make the argument that police going in and responding to riots, trying to stop acts of violence and property destruction after when the riots were caused by a violent action by a police officer in the first place, that it only escalates and makes things worse. Well, okay, let's say this actually did happen. I'm not going to say this. Say a police officer did something to harm a member of the community. He committed a crime. He murdered somebody. That was wrong. Now, just because of that, should the police stop doing their job protecting the rest of the community, but from people who aren't even from that community, who are coming down to burn down their businesses and physically attack them?
Well, and see, that's where I don't know what the right answer to that is. I could see kind of where you're going with that, and I don't disagree, but at the same time, I don't know. There's a social contract, like I was saying earlier. The public gives, the way it's, again, theoretically works. I'm sure there's any ANCAPs out there that'll hate this, but the social contract is that we've given a mandate and power and authority to the cops to use additional force that a regular civilian can't use. We've given them that with the idea that they would protect us with it. In this case, that contract, that social contract, was totally broken. And so I don't know if it's appropriate to say, oh, well, we'll do better this time. I believe somebody else already got shot and killed, whether it was right or wrong. It still happened there. But I could see from the idea of the public. No, I don't understand. I don't understand or accept the rioting, but I can see the idea of, well, why should we trust you to protect us now? And this is kind of going back to what I was saying at the beginning. There's kind of this broad collapse of cities. We're seeing this all over the place, and each time it kind of gets worse and worse. And this is certainly one of the worst that we've seen. I think that the coronavirus has accelerated a lot of the timetables. I think this kind of stuff probably would, at this level, we might have seen it in 3 to 5 years had the coronavirus and accelerated stuff. But I think that this is just going to be the first of many such broad-scale riots like this. Yeah. And it's because, like I said, I think that in the big cities there's a massive problem with the police forces, with the governments, and this idea that the governments are there to help you, that they are there to serve you. And in the big cities, that's just been so untrue for so long. There's been the public's largely avoided the consequences of it. Having these very corrupt cities, but you can still. What was that? Having these very corrupt cities, but you still live and breathe. But it's getting worse and worse now. You've got a lot of these cities. They've abused their power to the extent, certainly on the West Coast, where it's nearly impossible to live there now with the types of problems that the left likes to attract to their cities. And on the East Coast now, we had a bunch of cities with just like extremely authoritarian responses to the coronavirus, targeting, well, this is kind of all over the country, but targeting small businesses. We've had just a broad scale collapse of your ability to have gainful employment. You've had a lot of police abusing their power. And so I can kind of see, I kind of sympathize with the idea of, well, why should I trust anything from the government, whether it be your local or state, to come help me or to protect me or to serve me? They've not done that. They've very much damaged my life. They're killing people that look like me. It's why should we put up with them being here at all?
So I'm not implying it'll be easy, but I tell you the what's not the answer is doing nothing and letting the community be further victimized by the rioters.
Well, I did. Did you see the story of the teams of
guys? That's coming up next. Yeah. So I was gonna say, but this whole situation does highlight how the right to bear arms is very important because of situations just like this. There was a group of mostly black men who were legally, they're saying, I can't prove whether or not, it doesn't really matter at this point.
Well, it's a constitutional carry. Maybe not there, but that's how
I don't know what the law in Minnesota is, so I can't say that they
it doesn't matter what the law of Minnesota is. They got the law of the land there, Dyer.
Oh, right then. They were demonstrating their right to bear arms to protect storefronts from being rioted. Sorry, not rioted, looted. What the fuck? That was the wrong use of that word. From being looted. And that's a great thing. They're preventing, that they were able to protect their property and their lives from these people who were coming from outside of town who were just taking advantage of the crisis to steal some stuff. So, I mean, you can't always depend on the police to be there for you. They don't usually protect you. They usually show up afterwards to take the report. So, I mean, if you, I think there's a great example of why the right to bear arms is pretty important, because this community, because they had it, they were able to defend their property.
Well, I think you're going to probably see the left kind of let it slip away from them, this gun control issue. So the left in America is doing what is very similar to what a lot of other left-leaning regimes around the world and during history have done, where they have gotten rid of the guns, and then a few years later they've got some pretty extreme authoritarian measures coming through. The left in America kind of overplayed their hand a little too early. They kind of showed their cards a little too early with the authoritarian stuff, and people realized, like, oh heck, I really better not give up my guns. And I think that you're going to see the base from the left. You're still going to have your Twitter elites, the 2% on Twitter there. I'm sure that they're still all going to be anti-gun. But you're like actual people, like living and breathing in the world. I think that they're going to start seeing through that. Certainly in this community, you're probably going to have a lot of, presumably some of them are Democrats, or at least potential Democrat voters. Why on earth would they, or the small business they were protecting, or the family or friends of that small business, or the patrons of that small business, why would any of them now, how could they possibly go vote for gun control legislation now? I just don't see how that's going to happen. We're starting to see that all over the place with coronavirus again too. There was certain I hesitate to call it militia activity, but I suppose that's kind of the constitutional name for it. Would be if you need to have a citizen defense from a tyranny, from a tyrannical oppressor. So a lot of these people are going to become 2A advocates. They already are to a certain extent, but it's going to become more visible to the public for those who are maybe on the fence or maybe against Second Amendment. They're going to start seeing this and say, "Oh, that's what that was for. It wasn't about hunting. It was so that when the cops kill someone in our community, and then that triggers broad scale civil unrest." And just what is nearly a war zone in the streets. I mean, this looks. I'm remembering This brings kind of a flashback to the Iraq embassy being attacked earlier this year. At the end, I think it was like the first week of this year. This picture up on the screen right now looks very similar. Which, if you're watching the stream, let me show you my screen here. This picture looks very similar to what happened at that embassy. You got a burned out car there, just all kinds of chaos going on in the background. This is like supposed to be a city where people are living in America, and I don't know. I think a lot of people are going to see this and say, I don't think I can ever trust the government or the police ever again to protect me. I really need to be able to protect myself. And, wouldn't you know it, I live in a country where that is the second enumerated right that I have of many. And I think I'm not going to vote for somebody who's going to get rid of that. I think I'm going to maybe be an advocate for that. I think we're going to see that more and more and more as this goes on, and as these cities continue their decline, continue their breakdown, continue becoming more and more dangerous. I think New York's a powder keg right now with the mass unemployment there. This is gonna be a crazy summer for New York, and I think a lot of other major cities that saw broad loss of business. I think kind of the trope that we look at the Middle East with is like, well, if they all had jobs, they wouldn't have time to go around and do all the crazy stuff that they do over there, and that tends to be how we've seen it in America. Is when times are good, when the economy is good, people don't got time to go do stuff like this. They got jobs to go to, they got families to feed and money to spend. They don't need to go out and riot. They don't have time for that. But right now you have just an unprecedented number of people unemployed with nothing to do, and months and months of having the government boot at your throat, for some of them literally. And I think that you're going to see a lot of people realize, oh yeah, that's what the Second Amendment was for.
Yeah, most likely. So we had I already covered that. What do you think the end results of this is going to be? Do you think the police officer's actually going to get put in jail for murder?
I don't know. So we tend to see this a lot more than what we should. Is police are treated very, very gently in the justice system. I'm remembering that case with that girl police officer who came back to the wrong apartment and killed somebody, and it took them months to arrest her for murdering that guy. And they're very, very kid gloves with her the whole time. And there's other stories like that. I'm remembering a lot of them. It's not worth going through them all, and that's certainly a problem. I think you're probably not going to see that in this case, especially getting the FBI involved. The fact that the precinct already fired them, which is, I think that's pretty big. Normally in a case like this, you'll see administrative leave or something like that. This one, the police department immediately fired them, which I think that kind of shows where the police department's at on it, saying, yeah, we don't want to be anywhere close to trying to protect these guys because we don't think it's worth it. We don't think it's going to come out well. So that right at the bat tells me I don't think that these guys are going to be getting that kid glove treatment. But as of currently, I believe they are uncharged. I believe that I know this afternoon that was the case. That may have changed in the last few hours, although unlikely. But as of my last count, they had not been charged with anything. Which when did this happen? Was this 2-3 days ago? Which seems pretty egregious, and that was the same thing with the Ahmaud Arbery case, where charging somebody with something does not mean that they are guilty of it, right? But there is a presumption that something happened, and that's what the whole point of charging somebody is for. We saw it in the Ahmaud Arbery case where it was like 75 days before any of them were charged with anything, when there was clearly something wrong happened. And I think in this case, clearly something wrong happened, and we don't see charges. I've heard more than one. A couple of different commentators have kind of used the analogy of anyone else, any civilian on the street. You go grab a guy, kneel on his neck for 7 minutes, and he dies. You're probably going to get charged with murder before 3 days. It's probably going to be a little quicker than that. And I think that they're going to end up paying the price. I think it's going to be a pretty steep punishment for them all. But we are again seeing that there's a little bit of blue privilege when you're in the legal system, where you're a lot slower to get charged, you're a lot slower to get taken into custody, and that's not good. It's not supposed to be a two-tiered justice system where the enforcers they're not bound by the same laws that you and I are bound by. They're not bound by the same consequences for their actions. That's going to be a problem, certainly. And again, we see this kind of all over the place. So it's not just this precinct; it's all over the place that we see this, which is not good. That's kind of that's a systemic problem in American police culture. Again, back the blue, but there are problems, and that's certainly one of them. So I think ultimately, though, where this ends up is that they will be highly likely to be convicted. Probably a very long trial. I don't see how that goes by quickly. I'd be curious to know what I'm not positive what the FBI investigating it does. I don't know how that changes what the punishment is. Are they just would the FBI just be investigating just like, I guess out of curiosity, for lack of a better term, or would that be like setting up like some kind of like federal charge of some kind?
Well, yeah, they can refer their investigation to the DOJ and have them taken up in for federal crimes.
Okay.
That's what's going to do. There's the investigative branch. They pass it off to DOJ.
What would their jurisdiction in this be? I know the FBI has like broad jurisdiction.
They could just say they're investigating a hate crime. That's one of their many different ins they have.
I guess that's a question too. Is do you think this ends with it being a hate crime?
I don't think so, but they don't have to be. So how they whatever in they use to start the investigation doesn't have to be the conclusion of it, right? Yeah. So they can use a lot of the bullshit reasons to say this is a federal case to investigate.
Timber says he thinks it's a hate crime that they're using to get in.
They use that as to get into a lot of different investigations as the premise. But then they can just say, okay, this isn't a hate crime, but still referring for criminal punishment to the DOJ to prosecute for felonies.
What do you think's going to happen?
So I think that there's no way they can have any kind of healing with the local police department and the community unless they are charged. They have to be charged. It would be the only just thing to do. So not only is it what I would aspire to happen because I morally think it's right, I think it's the only thing that, even if you're cynical and say that people only do things for political reasons, I think politically is the only step they can make is to ensure that they are held accountable for their crimes. Beyond that, I think that they will ensure that the punishment, the court will be a long case, and the punishment will probably not be very severe.
I'd like to see this broadly, like across a lot of different categories of government, but I'd like to see some more accountability from the leaders. I'd like to see the police chief or the sheriff, probably police chief in this instance. I'd like to see him resign, saying, this was clearly there's something wrong with how I lead my people, and I will resign because of that. I would like to see that in a lot of other places. There's a lot of places during the coronavirus where I think a lot of your leading public officials probably should have resigned for things they did or said. There's a lot of other instances where I think that we've certainly in my lifetime, and maybe this is just how politics has always been, probably more how politics has always been, but it seems to be that the leaders always like to pick out a fall guy. And it's never the leader's fault. It is always some grunt's fault, and the leader is immune to all of that stuff. And I would like to see some more accountability from the top. I think that would go a long way to the extent that it's possible to heal the community, which I don't think that's possible. I think it's pretty deeply damaged there. But I think a long way to getting that road started is saying, as the head of the police here, the police administration here, I think that I've done a poor job at serving this community, or getting my guys to serve this community, and gals, I'm sure. And so I'm going to step down and let somebody else take a crack at it.
We're equal opportunity. Even the women can be better at jobs.
Exactly. Yeah, certainly women can be just as poor at their jobs as we know. There was that one girl was trying to get she's trying to bring up the gender gap for police brutality there. So I think that would be something I would like to see happen. And again, I think that's just broadly all across America. We've got a lot of accountability problems, and I think it starts up at the top. Same thing with like the FBI and stuff like that. I'd like to see some of the more resignations there, but I don't think that will happen. But I think that would be the right thing to happen. I'd also like to see a lot of resignations of police departments all across America, of the ones that were enforcing very authoritarian COVID regimes there. But again, as I said, it is perhaps it's always been like this in politics, but certainly in current America, there is a tendency for our quote leaders to pick out fall guys and not take responsibility for those that they are leading.
Agreed. I actually nothing else to add for this story. I think we covered all the bullet points I want to go over.
It's certainly still developing. How long do you see this going? I mean, I think they're on day 3 and there's still stuff on fire, big fires.
Ferguson was like at least several weeks, right?
Do you think there's going to be a several weeks thing?
I think that this could be will run for at least a week and a half, but I don't know.
I don't disagree with that. I'm just shocked that that's a possibility. Not that I disagree with it. It's just and then thinking back to what I said too a little bit ago is you got a lot of unemployment right now. You got a lot of people who've been very hurt by government actions and this pandemic over the last 4 months. You know, a lot of people who've lost their jobs. You now have a lot of people in Minneapolis who are homeless as of 2 days ago because their apartment got burned down. You've got a lot of perfect storm stuff coming together to make this be a very long, drawn-out ordeal because there just is nothing else to do. These people don't have jobs to go back to. They really don't got a lot of food in the pantry. There's just broad scale services shut down. They've got nowhere to go. Even if they had money, they don't got anywhere to spend it. This could not have happened at a worse time for public being a powder keg there. And we've already started to see it. There was I don't know, what would you call it? Sympathy riots in other cities. I believe Baltimore was also rioting over this.
Yeah, and it's going to take a lot on the community leaders to tamp down the tensions. And the problem with that is more like half the country's community leaders and political leaders have no interest in tamping down the rhetoric of calming people down. They politically benefit from the people being upset, right? So I am skeptical that it's going to be a whole lot of cool heads prevailing. You know?
Yep. Yeah. So, and certainly the left will love taking advantage of this, as they always do. So.
Yep. All right. I guess we'll be back on Saturday then with the weekly news recap. We still have a lot more to talk about as far as the news. This is one topic.
A lot of news happened. All the news.
A lot. We leave for 2 weeks and just a bunch of stuff happens without us.
Yes.
Who authorized this?
So almost like we took a break, but the news did not. How dare it?
I mean, the previous 2 weeks there had been very little news. How could we have known?
Yes.
All right.
All right, guys. You guys have a good night. We'll see you Saturday.
Direwolf out.
Shaviz signing off.